Welcome to the Be Raire Podcast. This is episode 4 with me, Jessica Kimber, and today we've got Darcy O'Rourke, who is a financial advisor and broker. So a little bit of a different guest to the typical recruiters that I have on the show. So Darcy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So do you know what? I wanted to kick off actually with telling the story about how this podcast came about, because it's actually so interesting. Because Darcy, we weren't even connected on LinkedIn at all. And then 24 hours ago, you emailed me and you sent me a video on Loom, a 1-minute video, which was basically saying how you could be a guest on the podcast and how that could benefit us both. And we then connected on LinkedIn, and 24 hours later, here we are, and you're on the podcast. And the reason I wanted to mention that is because I love people that just go out there and they're like, you know what, I'll just ask the question, because if you don't ask, you don't get, right? And look, here we are now. So thank you so much for doing that. To kick off, I'm curious to know, is that your approach when you're dealing with sales professionals or you're trying to find clients? What is your approach?
Yeah, I'd say my approach is probably a little bit softer than that. I do sort of do outreach where I'll send educational content and things like that to people that I think could benefit from it, and then hope that they see the value in it, and we can kind of tee up a meeting and progress things from there. But yeah, I do a bit of stuff like this. This is, I think, probably my 4th podcast that I've been on. So
love it.
Things like this, just building up my personal brand and helping people understand what I do and if they're a right fit for what I do and how I could potentially help them. So it's really just putting the word out there around what I do. And I guess once you start doing that, which you've probably seen with all the personal branding that you work on, people just start to sort of come to you once you start building up that brand.
Look, personal branding is so important. And you know what? I'll ask you some questions about that soon. But I mean, to kick off this episode, just tell me a little bit about, what you do and how you can potentially help recruiters as well.
Yeah. So I'm a financial advisor and mortgage broker, and I work with people in the sales space. So obviously recruiting is, there's a big sales element to it. So recruiters definitely fall under who I'd like to work with. Before I launch into any of the financial stuff, I do need to let people here know that everything we're discussing is just general in nature only. So it's not personal financial advice. And I strongly recommend that you consult a financial advisor before you make any decisions. I also need to let you know that I'm an authorized representative of Lifespan Financial Planning. Their AFSL is 229892. So that's the compliance stuff. But what do I do? So there's 2 elements to it. So there's actually 2 businesses. There's a mortgage broking business and then a financial planning business. But I essentially help sales professionals holistically with their finance. So if you think about your finances overall, generally those 2 businesses let me capture most things that people need help with. So when people come to me, a lot of the time they kind of fall into, I'd say, 3 buckets. Generally, that's what they fall into. The first one is the person that's kind of starting out, getting their finances on track. They're probably making good money, but spending a lot of it, which is a very common thing that people can fall into, especially once. Yeah. You start making some good money, you're feeling good, you go out and treat yourself, and then you're sort of looking at your bank account going, maybe I shouldn't have done that.
Where did it go? Yeah.
Where'd it go? It just vanished. I've got this nice stuff. But so I'd say that's sort of the first sort of category where people will come to me. The second one, people that come to me, they've kind of done a few things right. Like they've probably bought a house. They might save a little bit of money here and there, and maybe have invested in 1 or 2 things, but they're not really sure of what to do next. Like they bought the house, where do they go next from here? Or they want to start investing, but they've heard that you should invest in ETFs. They don't really know what that means. They don't know where to go from there, that kind of thing, right? People that sort of have a bit of an idea of what they're doing, but they're not quite sure and they need some help. And then the final category, I'd say, it's the person that's kind of gone really hard and they might have bought multiple investment properties and invested in these companies they think you're going to take off and go amazing, but perhaps they haven't gone as well as they thought, and they've got tax issues and they've got all this debt now and they're trying to manage it all, and they kind of need some help getting on top of it. So I'd say they're the 3 categories of people that will generally come to me. And yeah, the way that I help is basically just getting all this stuff in order and having a plan to follow. Like in recruitment, it's a very process driven industry. you have your processes that you follow, and those processes will lead to the right outcomes. When it comes to people's finances, a lot of the time they don't have those processes there, and they're kind of just winging it. And because of that, they don't get the outcomes they want, which is to be expected.
Of course. Yeah. Look, that makes total sense when you say it like that. What would you say are the most common problems or challenges that you see people face when it comes to their finances?
Yeah. There's a few. I'd say one of the biggest ones, which is an easy one for anyone to address, is not regularly investing. So
Okay.
I'd imagine like your audience probably don't have much trouble paying their bills. They're probably earning good money, not having trouble paying their bills. I would recommend treating investing like a bill. So have a regular withdrawal from your account where you manage your money from that goes into an investment, whatever it may be. It doesn't even have to be anything big. If you start investing $100 a week from the age of 30, just as an example, and you got a 5% return, by the time you were age 65, you'd have about $500,000. So really small amounts. If you're just regularly doing it and you treat it like a bill, that will start to get you ahead. And it's a simple, like if it's like a bill, you don't really think about it, right? Whereas if you're having to sit down and think, oh, what am I investing in? When am I going to do it? Your brain's getting in the way, and you're kind of becoming your own worst enemy in that sense. You just need to make it happen automatically. So I'd say that's one of the biggest mistakes, is not regular investing, and it's a really simple thing to address.
Okay. That's super interesting to hear. And I think what would hold most people back in that is like, where do you start? Like, I want to invest, I've made that decision, but what do I invest in? There's so many different options out there. So let's just say somebody's a complete beginner. They have some spare cash. They're wanting to get started. What would you say that they do first?
Yeah. So an easy starting point are ETFs. So they're exchange traded funds. So that's a investment that you can access through stock exchange. So you could have an account through like a CommSec is probably the most well-known one because it's Commonwealth Bank. They're the biggest bank in Australia. But there's plenty of other brokers out there. So you can access these kinds of investments through that. It's very low cost. So that's one of the key appeals to most people, is the fees are very low for investing in that kind of investment. And one of the things you really want to consider is your time horizon around your investment. So if you're only investing for, say, 12 months and you're wanting to purchase a home or something like that, I wouldn't really recommend someone would start investing in shares if they're falling into that scenario. The reason being is shares, compared to other investments like term deposits and fixed interest investments, are very volatile. So in a bad year, your investment might drop 30, 40%. So if you have a 12-month time frame, it isn't really the appropriate way to invest, because you might lose 30, 40% of that money, and then you go to buy the property, you don't have the money there. If you're investing for retirement or something like that, you've probably got 20, 30 years that you're investing for. So if you have a 30% drop one year, but you have a 35% gain the next year, it's not going to matter as much. It's going to balance out over the long run. So I'd say what you need to consider is time horizon, how long you're investing for. If it's long term, you can look at things like shares, property, those growth assets that are going to have more ups and downs. If it's more of a shorter term time frame, you'd be looking at more defensive assets. So cash, term deposits, things like bonds. So a bond is basically a loan to a government or a company, and in return they pay you interest. So you can actually loan money out to businesses. So that's more stable.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I feel like myself, I know somewhat about the finance world and investing, and I have done a little bit of investing in the past as well, but I've always found it so volatile. Like I've always found it like I've never quite understood or got in the depths of one thing or another. It's almost like I've dipped myself into a lot of different things, and then I guess from that mentality, you get to a point and you're like, well, what works? But the answer to that, I guess, is they all work. It just depends on your situation, and you need to assess like where you're at and what you're looking to achieve.
Yeah.
Let's just say I was somebody and I wanted to go for a long-term investment. I wanted to put a short amount of money away per week. I know you gave the example of like $100 a week. It ends up being $500,000 bucks. But like, what would you say is the ideal amount where you can compound an amount where you can genuinely live off it. However, it's still achievable in terms of what you would need to spend per month.
Yeah. So it really depends on what your goals are. Like this is another mistake I find with a lot of clients is they're very goal driven and goal oriented when it comes to their career, but when it comes to their finances, they're not really that goal oriented. They might have a goal like buy a house, something pretty sort of simple, but they haven't really thought of when do I want to retire and what kind of income do I want to have then and what kind of lifestyle do I want when I reach that retirement. So it's kind of like how long is a piece of string if we're looking at answering that, but it all comes back to goals. So if you're someone that wants to like live a simple life and move to Thailand or something, you probably don't need that much money to live off that, live that kind of lifestyle. But if you're wanting to live in the CBD in Australia, you're wanting to own a house outright, you're wanting to travel to Europe twice a year, you're going to need a lot more money. So it really comes back to your goals and understanding what they are. And then from there, looking at how much we need to invest to get there. One of the good things that everyone has in Australia working in their favour, if you're an employee, is you've got your superannuation. You've got 11% of your salary is going into your superannuation fund, and that's invested in the market for you. That's growing over time, and you can access that when you retire. So that will be able to provide you a retirement income by the time you get to that point.
Okay. That's an interesting point, actually, because being from the UK myself, when I came to Australia, I did not understand what superannuation was. I was very confused. And there's also a lot of people from overseas who will come to Australia and get sponsored. So can you share a bit of information or insight into superannuation and how it works and what that would give recruiters in the future?
Yeah, definitely. Superannuation is probably the simplest way to reduce your tax in Australia. Like it's a very, very simple. People think of superannuation like it's a different thing to investments. What you need to do to really understand super and get it working well for you is think of it as a tax structure. So it's still your money. It's all your money that's invested, and this is going to provide for you in your future. But it's just a tax effective way to invest. So when you're working, you're in accumulation phase with your superannuation fund. And what that means is your superannuation is taxed at 15%. So let's say your super fund generated a return of $100, you would pay $15 tax, as an example.
Okay.
If you're in the top tax bracket, you're paying close to $50 tax instead of 15, right? So it's a much more tax effective place to invest. That's while you're working. So you've got this tax effective vehicle. Over time, those returns are compounding. The compounding returns are paying less tax than if you were owning it in your personal name. When you get to retirement, based on the current laws, the tax rate is actually 0%. So it's a really tax effective place to invest. So you've got either 15% or once you get to retirement, 0%. There's caps with your superannuation. So you can only put in $27,500 pre-tax dollars at the moment. That'll probably go up with inflation. So there's caps on that. And then there's also caps on how much can be in that 0% tax environment. So at the moment, that cap is $1.9 million. So if you, just to like run, I've got my calculator here, just to run some numbers, like if you had $1.9 million, let's say you had the top amount and you were to draw down 4% per annum, that'd be $76,000 that you'd be drawing down. So you could draw you basically draw a salary down when you're in that pension phase that would provide for you when you're retired. So it's a really, really good place to invest. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And that's so interesting because I feel like superannuation forces you to invest, but I know that the companies pay for the superannuation on top of salary, so it doesn't come out of your own pay packet. So it's a little bit different. But I think at the same time, like if you could apply those same principles to how superannuation works to your own investments, that small amount, that 11%, every single year, the compound effect would work its magic, wouldn't it? And that would be, you come out on top with that. what I'm also curious to know is actually, I think with investments, like even some people, they have the knowledge of how to invest or what to do or what assets that they're interested in. However, there's still a bit of a fear factor there because there's so much noise in the media or online around, different trends. Crypto's in fashion 1 minute, and then there's something else coming along, and then there's, so if somebody has that almost like fear factor, they think they know what they're doing, but they're just terrified to take the leap. Like, what would be your advice around that?
Yeah. So it's very common. People that have like facing that fear, they're not alone. A lot of people are feeling the same thing. And what you basically just need to do is rip off the Band-Aid. it's like in sales and recruitment, a lot of the work that you do, you just need to rip the Band-Aid off and start doing it. Because if we sort of think back over the past few years, there's always a reason not to invest. Like we had COVID, and then before that there was Trump, and then there was the Ukraine war, then there's Israel war. So there's always going to be a reason not to invest, and always a reason that the market could perform poorly. But if we have a look at what's happened historically, that stuff over the long run, it's not really that important. Like it's not very it's quite immaterial and doesn't have an impact on the long-term return. So we need to remove ourselves from being stressed about what's happening in the moment and think more long-term. If we read things like the AFR and read the news, their job is to get your attention. Their job isn't to educate you and to help you make good financial decisions. What they're wanting to do is to get you to click on their article, read their article, share it with your family, and with that attention, they then bring in advertising money. So they're not concerned about making sure you're educated and you're making the right decisions. I saw a presenter who'd been working for the financial news for something like 20 years. And it was with a fund manager who did like a PD day that I went to. And he basically showed you how anything that happens, they could frame it in a positive or a negative way. And they just make it negative to basically drum up the attention.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, look, that doesn't surprise me. I stopped believing anything the media said a very long time ago because it's headlines, isn't it? It's just that attention. We're in the era of attention at the moment, and things that captivate attention in a world that's so full of information is what sells. And that's where the customers are. And the more customers or users on a platform, the more money that's made, right? So it's, it makes a lot of sense. But it's also scary to think that there's so many people who would actually read that and take that literally and make life-altering decisions about finances or anything else based on an article that has been crafted for a reason that's maybe not, there to educate you. So that's a little bit scary. But I mean, where would someone start then? Like, let's just say someone wanted to go off and do their own research. What's the best and most reliable sources to know the truth?
Yeah, so all financial products in Australia have to provide product disclosure statements that have information on the fees and the risks and everything like that associated with them. So if someone wanted to do their own research, they can definitely read through those. Like it's a legal requirement that they have to provide those documents, and they can get an understanding for what level of risk will be in the investment and the fees associated with it and things like that. But yeah, ETFs are an easy starting point. You could definitely go down that path. For someone that's wanting to invest even an even smaller amount, you could look at micro investing apps. I tend to sort of say, move more towards something like an ETF where you're going to have a little bit more skin in the game. Like there's not much point in putting like $10 a month or something into an investment, right? We want to do a little bit more than that where it's actually going to be material. So that's why I like ETFs as a starting point, or just managed funds. You can access managed funds as well, and they have to do the same thing where they'll provide information on how much risk they're taking and the fees and everything like that. Obviously, if someone wants one-on-one help, they could reach out to me or another financial advisor if they want to, and we help out with this kind of thing.
Yeah, awesome. No, that's great advice. And I think sometimes just having that initial conversation with somebody who can point you in the right direction opens your eyes to a world of possibility, and then from there you can go into your own rabbit hole, but at least that way you've got the direction. And obviously it's your job to know what's happening in the market as well, what's up, what's down, what's hot, what's not. So yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. We mentioned as well, I'm just keen to have a chat about like the attention era, because something we were talking about just before we logged on was like personal branding, and sales professionals as well as recruiters, the way that people, and by people I mean clients, make purchasing decisions is very different now to what it was 10 years ago. So talk to me a little bit about that in terms of, you know, your strategy or what your thoughts are around how people do make those buying decisions these days.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's completely changed compared to where it was 10 years ago. And I've noticed this from my work. So, like, to give you a bit more of my background. So, I started working in financial planning about 10 years ago, maybe a tiny bit longer than that now. And I did it for 6 or 7 years and made the move over into B2B sales, so software sales. And I did that for a few years before moving back and starting my own business. And I've noticed this big shift. Like, when I first started, you could basically cold call someone and book in a meeting and people would sign up to things. It was very, very different,
Yeah.
right? Nowadays, people want to know who you are. They want to know what you stand for. They want to make sure that, like, they want to make sure you're the right person for them. Like, they know there's a whole heap of different options out there. They could go to anyone for recruitment. Why are they going to you? You need to be able to articulate why you're the right person for that. And that's kind of a big reason why I've reached out for this podcast, is I'm wanting
Yeah.
to build out my personal brand and let people know what I'm about. So I'm about helping people that work in the sales industry make the most of their commissions and this money they're earning, because you're working so hard to make this money. You need to make the right decisions to make sure it's actually getting you somewhere, instead of just sort of spinning on that hamster wheel where you're grinding year after year and not getting ahead. So I'm really passionate about helping people about that. And by doing things like this and my LinkedIn stuff and everything like that, it's really just helping people understand what I'm about and if I'm the right person to help them. I think everyone needs to start working on this when you are that person that has a responsibility for bringing in business, because of how people make their decisions. People want to Google you. They want to Google your business. They want to know what you're about, what you stand for. So if you're not focusing on this, you're probably going to lose out to someone else who is focusing on it.
Yeah, absolutely. You're speaking my language at the moment, because everything you've just said is exactly what I teach recruiters to do, because you're right, cold calls are so ineffective these days. And back in my day when I first started in recruitment, that was the only way, and that it worked because it was the only way. But there's so many different routes now to go down, and with that, people want to know that they can trust you. Like you said, there's so many financial advisors out there, so many recruiters out there. Like, why Darcy? Why Jess? And knowing your why me, like what do I have to offer, is so important. But then knowing it in here is one thing and projecting it into the world is another thing, because at the end of the day, if you're not posting about it, other people are just creating a narrative around what you can do and how you can help that has no bearing on your knowledge or, you know, everything that you can help with. And at the end of the day, it's left down to their interpretation. So I think it's on every single professional or somebody who is a lead generator or works in sales or deals with clients. They need a personal brand. And sometimes I think people will say to me, well, what about if people judge me and I'm not the right person for them? And I'm like, but that's just going to come to light when you go through the conversations with them anyway. Like, if you're not compatible to work with each other, that's fine. Like, you can't work with everyone. Like, no one on earth has got 100% success rate of clients and conversion, but that's fine. Find the ones that do want to work with you as well, right? And exposing yourself and putting your message out online is so important in 2024. With that though, the fear factor comes in sometimes as well, doesn't it? Like, how did you build the confidence to say, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. I know enough that I'm going to showcase that online, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah. I think the thing that really just made me decide just to start doing it, start posting on LinkedIn, start putting this stuff out there, just really give it a proper go, was what I've done in the past, working with the clients I've worked in the past in the traditional financial planning, where I'm just helping sort of your average person. I could go and do that again. I could go and be like everyone else. I could go just do the same monotonous thing that everyone else is doing. But what would my life be like if I did that? And what impact would I be having if I did that? It doesn't like get me excited. I'm not sort of thinking, all right, I want to go and just do the basic same financial planning as everyone else. I noticed there was this big problem because I'd worked in sales. I noticed there was no one out there recruiters get a pretty bad rap, right? People people say a lot of mean things about recruiters.
They do.
Same like people that are in these sales jobs where you're responsible for bringing in business. People generally aren't actually looking after you. Like there's no financial advisors out there that I'm aware of that specialize in salespeople other than myself. There's people that want to work with your doctors. There's people that want to work with your lawyers, and there's a lot of people that work in the sales space that need help. Like they're not making the right decisions. So I just really got like I sort of thought about it and just knew I had to start doing this because I have to let people know what I'm about because I want to help them. So I think it's your why. Like why are you doing this? If I think about recruiting, some of the most significant things that have happened in my life have been in jobs that I'm in, people that I've met when I've been in these jobs. And for all these jobs that I've been in, a recruiter has helped me get that job. A job is a big part of your life. Like what you guys are doing for people is a really big thing. Like it probably feels like a number when you're sort of doing the same thing day after day, but this is a really big, important thing in someone's life, and you're having a big impact on that. Like you're getting them that job. So for me, I'd be like, yeah, this is an important job I'm doing. So yeah.
Yeah. Look, I'm so glad you can see that side. Obviously, not every candidate has the same experience. It sounds like you've had some good recruiters in the past that have actually found you jobs that, you know, you've enjoyed, and you've got a high perception of what recruiters do. But there's a lot of people out there who have had, unfortunately, bad experience of ghosting, or they've dealt with slimy and pushy recruiters, you know. And look, it happens. I'm the first to admit that. But at the end of the day, that's not what everyone's like. And if you can find someone a dream job, that changes their entire life for them. Like your job affects everything because it pays you, it affects your family time, your mental health, your friends that you work with as well. It's also important. So yeah, look, no, it's great that you've got that perception of recruiters as well. And I think recruiters have a bit of a hard time in general, just, I guess, knowing their own worth and their value that they bring to clients. And therefore, this is how that lack of confidence actually does result in making no placements or less placements than what you're capable of, which then leads to them thinking, or clients thinking, well, that recruiter is not very good. But the reality is sometimes it's a confidence thing. And I think, look, relating that back to your profession in finance, like there's so much in confidence. Like if someone was just to speak to you and be like, where do I put my money? And to build that confidence, that could have a snowball effect on so many other areas of their life as well, right? So I think sometimes it comes back to the confidence side of things. But I mean, how would you deal with sales professionals, and you've been in sales yourself? Like, how would you teach recruiters how to build confidence and love sales? Like, what would your advice be there?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is just action. Like you've got to take action and just like push through the pain. Like it can be a bit daunting when you first start out, when you first start making calls and you first start doing cold outreach with like messages on LinkedIn and emails and things like that. But at the end of the day, the worst thing that's going to happen is someone's going to say no to you. Or maybe if you're like that 1 in 1,000, they might spaz out and then you laugh about it. Right?
Yeah, but they're the best stories.
Definitely. There's this guy called, I don't know if you're familiar with him, he's called Corporate Bro. So he does like content on, I think he's on LinkedIn, but he's also on Instagram and does content around sales. And one of the things he does is in America, like you can record cold calls. I don't think you need to like let people know that the call's recorded kind of thing. So he's got these horrible cold calls that he sort of like reenacts. So he gets a recording and then he mimes over the top like he's the angry person on the other end. And it's some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen. And you've just got to laugh about it. Like if it goes bad, all you can do is laugh about it and move on to the next one, because every no is getting you closer to a yes. And if you sort of come back to the why, like why are you guys doing this? You're really helping people. You're impacting their lives. You're putting them in these jobs that are changing their whole lives. To get there, you need to get told no a lot. It's the reality of it. No, people not responding to you a lot, but it's just what you need to do. Like it's a numbers game.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely. I think it is. It's definitely numbers, and I don't think the component of our role where we're interacting with clients, we're doing our cold call and our outreach, our business development, it's never going to disappear. But because even if you have got a personal brand, you enhance that by reaching out to the right people and then allowing them to see your personal brand and your content as well. So you need a good mix of, I guess, like multiple lead generation strategies, all working in conjunction with one another to move people throughout the funnel. That's what I found works in our space anyway. But yeah, I mean, look, what other advice would you have to recruiters going back to finance, where your expertise lies? Like, what are the top 3 pieces of advice you would give any recruiters making decent money, spends it all on the weekend, but would love to have a little bit more in their life? What would they do?
Yeah. So I've got a model that I follow with all of my clients, and there's 3 core areas. So I'll kind of touch on what those 3 core areas are. So the first part is having a process. If you don't have a process to build your wealth, it's not going to happen. So what I would recommend anyone do that wants to start investing and get in the market and start to build their wealth would be to set up an automatic investment. Don't try to do it sort of week to week or month to month where you're going, oh yeah, I need to invest, I'll remember to do it. Because if you do that, it probably won't happen. Or if it does happen, it might happen half the time. I'd set up an automatic investment that just happens without you even thinking. So that's the first part that I would do is for that process. There's a lot more that I work with people to get this stuff right, but I'd say that's the easiest one that people can do without having to contact me. Then the next part is having a strategy of where you're actually going to invest. So if you're wanting to do your own research and look at where to invest, I'd recommend looking at some ETFs. There's a lot of information out there online that you can look at to research these products. And you can then look at the product disclosure statement, which is where they actually have to legally disclose all the fees and risks and everything like that. So you can get all the information. It's all very transparent now. Financial products are highly regulated. So they're generally not like hiding anything sort of anywhere. Like once you read that document, you can get a good idea of what it's about. Then the final part I focus on with clients is having a backup plan. So there's quite a few different components to that backup plan. But I would say for anyone that doesn't have an emergency fund, work on building 3 to 6 months of an emergency fund, because things can go wrong. And if you don't have that emergency fund there, you might get into bad debt like credit card debt and have to resort to personal loans and things like that. So having that buffer there for if anything happens to provide for yourself and cover whatever expenses you need to is a really solid thing to focus on as well.
Okay. When it comes to debt, let's just say somebody has a reasonable amount of debt. It's manageable. Maybe it's a credit card or a personal loan. They've got monthly payments, but they have that. Would you recommend keeping the debt and investing alongside that and accumulating wealth alongside paying your debt? Or would you advise paying the debt off first and then starting to invest?
Yeah, so if the debt, there's 2 kinds of debt. So there's what we call good debt, and then there's bad debt. So bad debt is for things like lifestyle expenses, going on a holiday, you buy some dinner or whatever on your credit card kind of thing, right?
Gucci bag.
Gucci bag, yeah, Gucci bag. So all that stuff, there's no tax benefit to having that debt. But if you were to borrow money, if you were to pay that debt down, then you were to borrow money to invest in the stock market, for instance, the interest expense for that debt, you can claim that as a tax deduction. So it's actually a good kind of debt where you're getting a tax benefit for having that, and it's leading to a productive asset which is going to grow over time. So I'd say debt is really a tool to help you get ahead. A lot of people are sort of scared of debt or just think that it's always bad. That's definitely not the case. You can actually use debt to get ahead, to generate higher returns and to get tax benefits, as long as you're doing the right thing with it. But yeah, I'd say in that situation of someone who has accumulated that debt, assuming it's like credit card debt for lifestyle expenses, I'd say pay that down, knock that all over, get that done, and then start investing from there.
Yeah, okay. No, that's super interesting. I have quite a lot of clients and people who would watch this who are small agency owners as well. So perhaps they've been in a situation where maybe they're not generating revenue fast enough, they're not making placements fast enough, or perhaps their expenses have exceeded their earnings. What would you recommend if somebody's in that situation where they're kind of just month to month trying to break through, trying to make it work, but they're not quite there? Would you recommend things like business loans, credit cards, lines of credit? Like, what would you say is the most efficient way for them to break through that point, that barrier that they're at?
Yeah, if they're in that position, it would be pretty tricky to get loans, just
Right.
because if you're sort of trending in that direction, banks will generally want to look at like your history with your business, how much money you're generating and things like that. So it can
Right.
get a bit tricky to get loans. And then if you are looking at anyone that will provide a loan in that position, it probably will be a pretty high interest loan to
Okay.
get access to that capital. So I'd be saying, if you're in that situation, a lot of financial planning, when you really boil it down to the numbers and the money and how it all works, you can really do two things to affect your cash flow: is decrease expenses or increase income. So I'd be just looking at your expenses. Do you have some subscriptions that you aren't using? Like in a business, people sort of talk about subscriptions for personal finance, and it's like, oh, you've got a $10 Netflix subscription. That probably isn't that material. In business, obviously expenses are a lot higher. So you might have like $1,200 of subscriptions and you only need $700 of that. So you've got an extra $500 if you cancel a few of them. So that's a bit more material. So I'd say look at your expenses. Is there anything that you can get rid of that is a nice to have, not a need to have? And just start listening to what you're talking about with your personal branding, and just grind and bring in a few more clients, right?
Win more business, get out and build a personal brand and have more leads and more options. Yeah, no, 100%. I agree. No, that's interesting. I'm not sure whether this is within your remit, as I didn't ask you before, but let's just say somebody wants to start an agency, but they don't have the capital and they need an investor for that.
Yeah.
Where would they go? Like, what would they do if they're like, I know I can make this work, but I need 100 grand to do it? Where do they start?
Yeah, so I don't really operate too much in the commercial space, but I've got contacts that do. So if anyone is interested in that kind of thing, I can point them in the right direction for that kind of thing. So yeah, not really something I'm an expert at. Sorry.
No, that's good. That's all good. Awesome.
I guess one of my things I'd say in terms of not getting a loan is what I'd be doing if someone came to me as a client and they had that longer term goal, would be within your employment as a recruiter, focusing on building up that savings amount of $100,000 to help you get the business started. So I definitely do help clients with goals like that. A lot of what I do is based around your goals, as like with what you want to do in your life. That's a big part of it. And a lot of the time people want to do things like start their own business. So if it's not like, today I need a loan today, I can't do that. But if it's longer term, in 3 years I want to do this, let's create a plan of how to get there. That's more of the way I'd handle that.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay. Do you know what? That's actually a very good idea, isn't it? Like, I want to start an agency, and in 2 years, I'm going to save $100,000. Let's break that up. How can we invest to make that happen quicker? Yeah, that's smart. I like that. Yeah. I wish I was that savvy when I started my agency. I kind of just like quit my job in COVID and was just like, here I am. So yeah, I definitely didn't think ahead, which I mean, I've definitely learned some lessons along the way, but it's all part of the process, I guess. I can look back at them and laugh now. However, at the time I was like crying. So don't be me. Plan ahead is the message. Yeah, love it. Okay, awesome. Well, look, to wrap up this show then, let's give some tangible advice to our recruiters. Let's give them 3 top tips. What can they do today to start their financial journey?
Yep. So first of all, start a regular investment. So the first part is you need to know what you're investing in, right? So the first part would be to get out there, do some research and understand what you want to invest in, understand how much risk you want to take, and just pick something. Then from there, start a regular investment to invest in that account. So you're not leaving it up to chance. You're not leaving it up to your motivation, whether or not you feel like investing, because you probably won't. So automate it is the next part. And then from there, automate money going into a separate savings account for the purpose of that emergency fund. So you've got that backup there. So they're the three things that you can jump on. It's not going to take you too much time, but just by getting these 3 things done, that's going to start to get you ahead.
Security as well, isn't it? I think sometimes the mentality that comes with feeling secure, you can make better decisions because you're not stressed about the decisions that you have to make. So yeah, that makes sense. Definitely. It's almost like build security and long-term wealth as such, isn't it?
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, Darcy, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate your time. I'm sure your advice is going to help so many recruiters. We're good at recruitment, but we're not good at finances, a lot of us. So look, thank you so much. And I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Darcy. Speak soon.
Cheers.
Bye.